Hi, I'm Nicola. I'm the Director of Real Estate Development for Downstreet Housing and Community Development. I'm not sure if this will take a whole hour, but this is a project that I really could talk for an hour or more about. But I'll start, so we're here today to talk about Marsh House Apartments. And really kind of focusing on neighborhood infill and community centered design. So this is a project that is currently under construction in downtown Waterbury. It started construction this past year in February, but it was a project in 2025 that I started working on in 2023. And so, but before we get into the project, I figured I'd give you a little bit of background on Downstreet Housing and Community Development. So a little bit about myself. I've been with Downstreet for 10 years now, started in 2015. My whole professional career has been in housing and affordable housing. I first started in the services side, and now I develop affordable housing and really fixed income housing. With Downstreet Housing Community Development, the mission is to strengthen the communities of Central Vermont by creating permanently affordable homes, promoting equity and inclusion, and connecting people to the resources and services they need to thrive. And so for housing, and there's a few different solutions that we bring to the table. We have many different departments. So I'm real estate development. So I develop housing, new housing. We have our portfolio, but also old units, low rehab, and great new housing. Then we in-house also property manage. So we own and operate all of the buildings that we develop. But then we also have a home ownership center where we have affordable equity, of affordable home ownership opportunities. And through our home ownership center, we have down payment assistance programs and financial wellness workshops as well. Why housing and why bringing housing? Housing is so important for the wellness of individuals. For physical, mental health, economic mobility and stability, for academic performance, for the economy and community health. Housing really is that first piece of structure, right? It's you need that stability with housing for all of these pieces. And I think that is really important for now. That integration of housing for the full wellness of the well-being of an individual
is really important. And I think everyone is very well aware of the housing crisis nationwide, but truly Vermont as well. As of 2025, we've got the fourth highest per capita of homelessness nationwide. It used to be second. So we are improving, but truly also the statewide figure is that we need 40,000 new homes in Vermont to meet the need by 2030. That is less than 5 years. And as a state, we develop about 2,400 homes a year. And so it is, we're not going to meet that. And that's, but it's also, I think everyone can really relate to the cost of housing. To rent, to buy, to construct, to rehab, to fix a plumbing issue in your own home, it is really expensive. So it's really important that we are providing solutions to everyone. Let's see. And so a little bit about what is affordable housing. So that's what Downstreet develops, and we are a nonprofit developer. So Downstreet and being a part of affordable housing is that we use funding sources and subsidies, and the hope is that people pay no more than 30% of their gross income to housing. Truly, that is what the goal should be, or what it should be in order for you to be able to pay all your other bills and live well. Most people in Vermont pay more than 50% of their income to housing. But we as an organization, we know that there's not one solution to housing. there's many, everyone deserves, I always say like 4 walls and a roof, but there's many ways to develop that, whether that be multifamily housing where you've got multiple units or a tiny home. There's different solutions needed for each individual. And so Downstreet really tries not to buy into that one size fits all model. I've created Housing a Women's Recovery Residence for women with children. It is the only place in the state of Vermont where women in recovery that are working through the recovery can have their children with them, which I think is a very important piece of recovery. We worked on creating different types of shelters. We have some tiny houses that are partnering with Washington County Mental Health to operate in a supportive environment. So truly different types of housing. Also working, a more recent project is working with Central Vermont Refugee Action Network that we have acquired a 4-unit building, rehabbed, and we are housing new Americans and their families that all are working in the state of Vermont, but some new American families might have 9 children and their grandparents, and trying to find even a 3-bedroom is really difficult anywhere, but those types of housing and services. Also, I think what's really important is the funding that Downstreet uses. We use state and federal funds, but our housing is perpetually affordable, meaning that our housing will always be affordable for life. So there's some states that do affordable housing that after 30 years, it will become unaffordable or can. This is actually like a state law with the state funding that we use. So in the state of Vermont, affordable housing will always be affordable. So this is a little bit about the process I have to go through with development in the housing. So this is really when I'm developing a project, and this can be a 4-unit building or a 30-unit building. The most I will usually construct is 30 units. But part of real estate development, it's a long process. A project that we just opened in Berlin, I started working on in 2018. So that process really took 7 years through design, figuring out the need, I'll work with organizations or towns and municipalities, trying to get that site control and design. Feasibility permitting can be something. There's, the state of Vermont and Act 250, I don't know how many of you are familiar, have changed, some of the state permitting that is making it easier for nonprofit developers. But there's quite a process that we have to go through the design, but then funding. So as a nonprofit developer, all of our funding is state and federal fund grants and loans and such. And the project I'm going to talk about, we had 13 different funding sources on them. Some of these funding sources, they only have 1 board meeting a year. And it's trying to, match the cycle up, but also if you don't get awarded in that year, you're waiting a whole other year. These are very competitive funds. And then, going through permitting, which I'll talk about in this project as well. So it is quite a process, and every timeline for every project is different. It's really challenging, but, I think for real estate development, for any type of construction, it's a very similar process for all projects but just will have different sizes a part of those stages. I would say that we spend a lot of time mostly on the feasibility work. Like we'll do feasibility, and that really includes like doing a code review, doing preliminary designs in order to get to funding. But then the design development process, bringing architect and construction managers on, really for us, it's about making the numbers and design work as well. But we also work really closely like with Efficiency Vermont and such. So now getting into the fun part. So this is the project I'm going to talk about today. So this is Marsh House Apartments, which is located in 51 South Main Street in Waterbury. So I'm here with Downstreet. We have another co-developer, co-owner. It's Evernorth. They're a statewide organization. And so I want to mention our architect team, which is GBA Architecture and Planning, because they've been such an important partner through this process. Because when I talk about this, you'll then understand the amount of community involvement that we've had for this project. But I just drove by our building on my way here, and the picture to the left was taken like a week and a half ago, and now the front facade is completely done. But it was nice pulling these pictures out of an actual picture, but then also for the designs that we used through the planning process. But for Marsh House Apartments, we're developing 26 units of affordable housing. We've got community space for the residents, and we've got an office space that will provide 24-hour services. So what's really interesting about this project is that we've got 5 units that are designated to those that were previously unhoused, but then we also have 3 units that are designated to those with intellectual and developmental disabilities. So they will have individual apartments that are outfitted everything just like our other residents, like all residents, but there is an office space that is outfitted like an apartment. It has a kitchen. It kind of is designed like our 1-bedroom apartment, but the bedroom can kind of be used as office space, but the ability for a service member to stay overnight. So it will, and we're partnering with Upper Valley Services to provide services for these residents. So they will, with our MOU, they'll be able to, through our process, bringing those residents to 3 units, and they will take care of the services. So depending on the needs of those residents, there could be someone in a 2-bedroom that has 24-hour live-in care. But there also could be individuals that are more independent that just need checked in on, or there might be a time where they need overnight services, and that office space is designated to Upper Valley Services to be able to provide those services. And so this is new. We are the first project statewide that is designing this way, but there is a real need for adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities for housing in the state, and there's a lot of recent energy in the State House. So we, as Downstreet, have come up with this type of solution, but also are working on another project with Upper Valley Services for a project in Randolph. It is a home that it will be full-time live-in care for 2 individuals, but we're just project managing it, we're not owning it. But this was all part of, so this really does show the type of housing and different types of housing that we'll provide. And this was definitely part of our feasibility work for here, but part of the communication with the town of Waterbury as we were going through the process. So let me go. So neighborhood infill is a strategy. So this is our plot. So we're located in South Main Street in Waterbury, downtown Waterbury. And so I will say before this project came to fruition, I met with the town manager of Waterbury every 3 months. He would reach out and and that's part of, some communities are doing that, keeping that idea of we need housing, these are plots of lands that we're looking at. So I always say this, it's really, honestly, I think most projects fall on my plate. I am not the one that's hunting for projects come to me. And so it was July 2022, I met with the town manager and the planning manager for Waterbury, and they said, hey, can you come? We're gonna go look at 5 sites in Waterbury, and you tell us where you can develop housing, and then we'll figure it out as a community. It's like, all right, so showed up and we walked around the town of Waterbury at 5 different sites. We looked at a site that was right next to the railroad tracks, and I was like, absolutely not, this is an environmental disaster. Looked at a site that was up a hill that I was like, there's no way for parking, a really narrow site, just trying to figure out how to develop. Looked at a site that was just really small, would not get many units. And then, we're looking at 2 sites, one that is in the floodplain on the hospital lot, the campus lot, and then this lot here, which was an underutilized parking lot. This lot that we're looking at used to be the town offices building that flooded in 2011 with Hurricane Irene, for those of you that remember. So also, I looked at this lot before the 2023 and 2024 floods, and we got site control on this property before then as well. So when I looked at this site in 2022, the town had taken down the town offices building. I think it was like 2021, 2020. It was during COVID that those buildings were taken down. And then it was created a parking lot. And, and this energy really came from the town of Waterbury about, we need housing, our employers need housing. There's an organization, Revitalizing Waterbury, that was doing a market study about the need for housing. Being like, we need housing downtown. How can Downstreet make this happen? What can we do to help? And so it was really, and then, so they brought this site to us, which is really nice. That's when we started kind of doing a little bit of a feasibility work, engaging with an architect, looking what was possible. Truly, it was between this site and even the other site that was in the floodplain, but Waterbury did not have site control on the other site. The state owned it still, and so nothing was going to be able to happen quickly there. Quite a process. It was going to take like 12 months in the state house. So we started looking to see what we could develop on this site here. And so this is where the community engagement begun. So this picture, and there's information on other slides, but I'm just gonna back it off here. So this site is in the Edward Farr Utility District. So within the town of Waterbury, there is a utility district. And in order for us to gain access to this site, the utility district needed to do a vote in order to sell that land to Downstreet. And so, I honestly do not know exactly how many people were in the utility district, but that's what started. So it became this process of there needs to be a public vote. And this is everyone that showed up for that hearing. So this is October 2023. And 273 people showed up in person to vote for this, and it's the biggest public vote that the town of Waterbury has ever had for people to show up. And I'll get more into the why that many people showed up. Yeah, so, 277 people. So we had to have this public vote, knowing that Downstreet started having some public meetings, sharing people so we got some preliminary designs about the project, really about, and we had to pull things together and start talking to the neighbors and figure out what the needs were. And we have documentation about the need for housing, but once you start getting public about what you're gonna do, a lot of opinions come to the table. So we sat down, we met with the neighbors, just the actual neighbors, but very quickly in these public hearings, it was like, oh, we need commercial. We want this here, we want that there. And it's very hard for housing us to develop commercial. But as words were getting out and we were explaining what we're gonna do, there became some NIMBYism, they're not in my backyard. Don't put that building right here, put it over there, put it behind. We don't need those type of people here. So very quickly, the community members of Waterbury, of EFA mobilized. It was incredible. What the community did was truly incredible. We had a total of 5 public hearings to share information about the project, about who Downstreet were, the people that we serve, what the project will look like, taking opinions, things like that. And the community members it was in this parking lot, someone set their trailer out with a big sign saying no to this housing project. And people were marching up and down the streets of Waterbury with signs saying vote no. So the community members of Waterbury went door to door in Effill, knocked on every single person's door that lived in that district. They posted in Front Porch Forum. People volunteered for free childcare the night of the vote so that people could come out to vote. It was truly incredible. We had, the owner of the reservoir was coming, and like Prohibition Pig, they were coming out to our meetings to talk about the need for housing for their employers. It was truly incredible the amount of people that came up and were really passionate about it. So at this public vote, 277 people showed up to vote, 75% voted in favor of the project. Truly, we were really blown away when suddenly the very public no came out, but I was truly blown away about the community involvement and the passion for people to make this project happen. Also the fact that I didn't have to carry the energy. It's I am that person that when we're going through the development of, if something comes up with permitting, it's me, I have to figure that out and work through that. But it was the community that really understood the need for housing and carried that energy. It was really impressive. And then for that vote to happen, that picture, I'll go back, was, you can see, if I can go back. There we go. How many people we had to take. This is the firehouse in the town of Waterbury. We were trying to figure out a space. No idea how many people would show up, but it was so many people. But then the community engagement that showed up because we had an issue through permitting. So after all this and how many people showed up in favor of the project, through the local DRB permitting process, I had to go through 5 different zoning meetings for this project. And it was the things that the DRB were talking about. And so I actually had to end up quoting the state law, the new state law, because it was, and we'll get into this a little bit further when I talk about the design that we had to do, but it was, they wanted us to take, so the building is 3 stories. Zoning, we're allowed to have 4 stories, but I designed it to 3 so that we wouldn't impact the solar in the neighbor's roof, right? And then we had our design on our 3rd floor is set back so it doesn't look so tall on the street view. And they were asking us to set back and create less units. It's like, as the community 277 people showed up saying we need housing, they're asking us, we'd like the building to be smaller, so can you create less units? That's not the role of a DRB, right? And it was even being very picky about those types of things was really hard. We put a front porch on the building because of the setbacks for zoning. It has to be 10 feet, 10 feet within the street. If we're putting a building right on that street, then it's really gonna tower. None of the buildings close by were that close to the street. So we put a front porch on it, which will count that 10 foot, so that we'll fit in more of the neighborhood, so there's not this really tall building. But then it was, we want that porch to be bigger. Things like that. It was really challenging. Every single zoning meeting we went to, it was something else, And in the end, they voted this project down. And it was because that I wouldn't do a further setback and create less units. And we were able to we found something in the regulations from 1957 to be able to, the chair of the DRB was not present at the meeting so that he could vote after the fact, so that it was kind of overturned. But when this was voted down, it was chaos, honestly, for the DRB members. It was, again, instantly everyone mobilized. The amount of emails, letters, meetings, select board had to have an emergency meeting the next morning because of how public this project was. But it was the amount of calls that they were getting from the community members because of that process. So the community, I really think about this as not like Downstreet's project, it is Waterbury's project and the community of Waterbury. And this is, now I'll get a little bit into, through this process of, that community centered design principles in order to work with the community in the design. So this is the layout of our first floor building. And if you can see my arrow, like this is the office space that I was talking about, that is the 24-hour office space for those, helping serve those with intellectual and developmental disabilities. But here is the front of the building, and this is front porch. So, we've got an entrance, truly our main entrance, ADA entrance is out back, and that's where parking is. But we've got like that front porch feel with an entrance there that will go to a lobby as well. But we, when we're thinking about design, we're really thinking about inclusion, especially. So ADA accessible, we've got ADA units, but all of our units in our buildings are adaptable and visitable, especially new construction. So we have an elevator in the building, but we'll do so for instance, to make it adaptable, we put the blocking in all the units in order to be able to put grab bars in for bathrooms, but also to be able to move cabinetry, things like that. And so that is an added cost, right? Like think about the wood and wood prices at this time, but this is what we plan for now in the construction. It's easier to do that now rather than later, but we make sure that we're prepared for that. But in our first floor too, we always have a community space. So our main entrance is out back here. We've got community space. We have an office for services or for property management. And then we've got laundry for everyone in the building on the first floor as well that is ADA accessible. But so just, as we were thinking of that community center design, so that 10-foot setback, we didn't put that building right at 10 feet. We put a front porch. So it doesn't feel, so then the building, so where the building is, it's more in line with the buildings next to it. So it fits in a little more, so it won't tower over. We also have a back porch on the building as well. Just, it's part of the ADA accessibility, but just trying to think of, there's a neighborhood right behind this building of what do those buildings look like. Trying to really make sure we're fitting in that. And like I mentioned, a third floor setback. But also during the design process, we went to each one of our surrounding neighbors, all of the abutters, and asked, all right, we're doing this building. What are you concerned about? What do you need? Every single person came back with a different fence height. And truly at first, like we designed it being like, this person wants an 8-foot, this one person wants a 4-foot, this person wants a 6-foot, and really tried to figure that out. But then we're like, all right, why do they want an 8-foot fence or not? So, there was someone that's like, oh, I always walk through. And so honestly, where they are, instead of a fence, we have hedges. And I was like, but there's a risk. There's no, that means our residents could have easier access back there. We put a higher fence near where our dumpster enclosure is. There was a little old lady that was so concerned about emissions, but also about cars pulling in that the lights are gonna go into her living room. And she was actually such a naysayer throughout this whole project, but she brings a pot of coffee to our construction manager every Thursday morning, which is amazing. Like things like that, like it's, we really tried to ask and accommodate and figure out, like we really were thoughtful of, okay, where's our EV charging stations gonna go then? And no one wants the dumpster to be back to where their property is, but okay, in our dumpster enclosure, what can we do for a design? So, we're thinking of a green wall behind it as well, which just in that way of an extra buffer for those residents. But going the door to door, we can't accommodate everyone, in the end, I don't have a 8-foot, 6-foot, 4-foot fence because also residents, people move. I think we accommodated with a 6-foot fence all around where we have it, but even like a neighbor right beside us, we added a fence so they can get easier access to the back of their building, things like that, of just trying to be good neighbors, but letting people be heard, I think is really important and part of the process. And that's where, so when neighbors have not gotten exactly what they wanted, they at least know they were heard, and reiterating that too. Yeah, so this picture, this will show you, this is one of our neighbors. We truly are 10 feet away from them, which is really difficult. This site is 0.8 of an acre. So 0.8 of an acre, so we have to get a building in there, and it's long, so we have to get building in there, but a driveway as well. And so we really are tight. And so I think it was really important in that, and this is a neighbor that we have put like a gate to get access. They're actually about to start construction in 3 weeks, and they're hoping to put heat pumps in, and they're like, hey, how is there a way that we can get access to the back easier? And we're like, we'll put a gate in. And that is, it's not, they're not putting that gate in, we are as part of that neighbor. But again, this is just a little bit more about the back and forth and the thoughts that we've had on design. You can kind of see I love actually the design of this building, and it's not just a long rectangle. This part in the back where it's gray, that's also our building. So the hallway is just not one straight chute. It has a turn to it, so it doesn't feel so big, but the windows are amazing. We've got some really beautiful big windows that let in so much light. And that was something that was kind of during the DRB process, they wanted us to put these windows in, the exact same windows right here, to fit in with the neighborhood. But, and it's, an old building, just because something is old beside, don't construct to that. It's okay for in a neighborhood that has some older to build something that can still fit in with the neighborhood in a different way. And that's why we have the brick facade. That's something that we committed to in the design regulations for Waterbury. Did we need to have a brick facade? No. But this is where we tried, along with that front porch, was that building beside us is brick. There's buildings across the road that is brick. Let's put a brick facade in. That's adding project expense to us, right? Like, brick is not cheap. But that's the way that we tried to think about design. What can we do in order to fit this in with the neighborhood more? They really did not want us to have a flat roof, but it was also, we really were committed to electrifying the building and putting heat pumps in, and really, with that, having rooftop solar. And so, they were and trying to get to that conversation was really difficult, but, so it's quite amazing, like the conversations you have to have. It's like you'd rather have us not have a flat roof and not have solar in order for it to look better on the street. But I think just through conversations, I think it's much easier now that it's actually under construction. Yeah. Yeah, so this is our landscape plan, but this really shows our site for you to see how close we are to that building, but just the challenges of developing on this site. So actually up here in the top in the north, this is all utilities. This is like the utilities for this is the Comcast box. This is everything for the whole town of Waterbury that we had to move for this project because it was about here on the driveway. So this is a challenging site in order to fit, so we've got 26 units to fit car spots for each unit, and just be able to fit landscaping. So in our new construction buildings, I really try to think of, where is there green space? Where can we put a playground? Where is there a smoking shelter? Things like that. This is a tight site. There is a playground and a park 1/10 of an acre away. So when I was designing this and thinking about this, I was really trying to think of, there is a playground 1/10 of an not 1/10 of a mile, not 1/10 of an acre, 1/10 of a mile away that a parent can walk with their child over there. But with our porches, being able to have seating, having some picnic tables outside where possible. It's hard where this is grass area, there's actually a swell for stormwater. So it's really challenging to even put like a picnic table out. And so it is, but this is a downtown, this is what we would call a downtown in Vermont. And so, if you're in Boston downtown, do you have picnic tables outside? Do you have a garden? Do you have a playground? No. So we have to think about that during construction and design as well. This is where we put our dumpster enclosure up in the corner, and making sure there's accessibility. But this is, it is a very tight site on here in order to fit units. Yeah, so this is a little bit like the solar study that we did, and this is just part of, design when we were thinking of where to put the building. And it is the neighbor right here that has solar panels. She was very concerned when we were constructing how her solar would be impacted. And so really that's why we didn't go to 4 stories because of that. Also because if we did go to 4 stories, it would be higher than the other buildings on that street. So I was hoping that we would people wouldn't think our building was too tall or towering over. This one kind of shows August 10 a.m., August 5 p.m., and this is December 10 a.m., and this is incorrect because it's December 3 p.m., and really it's like much darker there, but in December, you're not going to get much solar anyways at that time. But it's like, these are the levels that we went to help talking to neighbors about what the impact of the project would be as well. Yeah, so then climate and flood resilience. So this lot is in the floodplain. And in 2023, how many of you are from Vermont? Okay, so 2023, 2024, central Vermont were really hit in the summer by floods. And it's in the communities that I served. So for instance, my office building is in downtown Barrie. I have video of the night before. I'm watching live video of water up to here hitting. And so I was tasked, the next day couldn't get access to our building. The day after, it was my task to go down to our office and see what is the destruction. Go down, and it only entered 2 feet into our building in the very back. And that is because we know how to develop in the floodplain. And it's just like flood mitigation level ways. In downtown Montpelier, we have a building, if anyone familiar with the transit center, it's 1 Taylor Street. We own that building, we developed that building. Our housing is up top, but there is pictures of the 2023 flood of water completely surrounding that building, but it did not go in because of the way that we developed that housing. So then this lot is, and that's why Hurricane Irene in 2011, this was the town offices that completely flooded, and they took this building down. Our architect lives in Waterbury. 2023, I was like, put on your rain boots. I need to see where the flood is. So this is the FEMA flood map, exactly on our lot. And so the water during that flood, it was completely flooded back here where the parking is, where this building will be. It's not. But we also develop our base floor is 2 feet above base flood elevation. So it is that is part of our water mitigation and stormwater plans. There's other things that we do with landscaping, but partly is we design 2 feet above as well. People's cars will not be safe, but the housing, people will be in their apartment dry. Our mechanical systems, our electrical systems will not be affected if there is another flood, when there is another flood, truly at this site. And so it is that, it's something that and then so 2024, there was another flood the exact same day. The flooding happened, if you all remember. Again, I was like, architect, sent him to the site. I was like, get some pictures, because I knew we were partially funded already at that time, and I knew our funders were going to come back and saying, hey, like, I don't know if we can develop in the floodplain. This is really bad. What are we doing? And I was like, get a picture, show us where that water is. And I was, where is it impacting? And it really did stick with the FEMA flood maps. But again, the conversation is, okay, so if it floods again, what are you doing? And I'm like, we're developing above mechanical systems, electrical systems, everything will be safe. People will be able to be in their homes and be safe and not be affected. And yes, it might be outside, might be challenging, the roads may be flooded, things like that, but people will be able to be safe in their home, and this building will be safe as well. And so it honestly, when you think about our rural communities are all in the floodplain. And so it's understanding, like, it's a choice as a state. Do we just abandon all of these communities, or do we learn how to develop and revitalize these communities? And I think there is a way to revitalize these communities and develop smart. And I think that's what Downstreet has been doing. And especially, like, our buildings that were flooded during the floods were old buildings that did not have any flood mitigation. And it was mechanical systems. It was, the heating and hot water and everything in the basement, and electrical systems that were flooded. And trying to bring that up, and these historic buildings are so challenging, but in new construction, doing it right, thinking about it now, that's a priority. And I think there's a way to do it and do it safely as well. So also with this building, this is our first building designing to the 2024 RB standards, residential building energy. Oh gosh, I'm butchering that. But 2024 RB standards, which is actually, the governor had an executive order 2 to 3 weeks ago. I don't know if anyone has heard about this. In order to expedite the development process, you can go back to the 2020 RB's design standards, just because there's a lot of impact financially and how long it's taking. But we're already under construction, and there's things that we could change, but we're going to keep to the design standards of the 2024. So that is, if you're using, really everyone should be constructing this way, but there's more stick tape. We're using state and federal funds, but we develop high performance building envelopes. So this building is all electric. It is my first building using heat pump hot water, or heat pump water systems, and that's really honestly even part of the downtown. I don't have a place to bury a propane tank, things like that, but which is really exciting. I think that this is where we need to be going, is electrifying our buildings. So we always design when we have electric buildings to solar ready, but honestly, not just solar ready, putting solar. So all of our rooftop is full solar. Everyone's gonna have a heat pump. But also the things that are kind of challenging with the 2024 that I think is a little bit ridiculous is that for every parking space that we have to provide the conduit for electric car charging. Every single spot. So, and who are the people that are actually doing it? It's a nonprofit developers. Conduit is not that expensive, like doing that, but it is not really people that are living in mixed income affordable housing that are gonna have the electric cars, but we're planning for the future. But with that, we're not putting in charging stations for all of the spots. We're putting in charging stations usually for 2, maybe more, 2 to 4. But the conduit is there at this building for every spot for electric charging. We have balanced ventilation, 100% LED lighting, and occupancy sensors. So these are just the things that we're thinking about in our envelope. We also in this building, because of where our budget came in, we've got triple pane windows, which is my second project putting them in. Honestly, the price is getting easier and easier. Triple pane windows are getting cheaper, and it is amazing the difference, honestly, for sound, but how tight our buildings are they're warm. They're really warm in the winter and warm in the summer, and that's really why then that we need to be providing air conditioning. I feel really strongly about that, just the way that the climate is going. I remember what summers were like 10 years ago. We used to have like one really hot summer. Look at this summer we just had. And so planning for that and making sure that we're providing adequate, safe, but housing everyone wants to live in. And so this is a little bit about and this is me nerding out, but our building envelope and air tightness. So part of the 2024 RBs is that we have to do testing for each unit. And so we were like, oh gosh, do we still do that? And we're like, you know what, we're building a tight building, let's get that done. So that's part of the air barrier. And we just did this testing. So this is an example of one unit. We decided to do one unit first, and there's some pictures from a report that I thought would be really exciting that you can kind of see of what everything is part of, just how tight and where we're taping these buildings. But it's about like, for the blower doors from the bottom, right, no one's seen a blower door test before. This is what I remember the first time I was part of one, it was like a building that was 7 units, and I had to like climb through the hole to help out. It was really exciting. Now I'm like, oh, this is old news. But so we just did this one unit to test it first. But you know, this is a fog test. So getting that, and this is before we've got any insulation in, but we got one unit ready in the top floor, and we're like still the floor before, we're still putting mechanicals and stuff in. But the taping from the outside and the sheathing, you can see a little bit from outside, the zip system's on. So this is our front corner unit, because this is the setback. But these are pictures from the report of just showing where all the tape was. So we've got a fog test going on right now, and there's no fog exiting the building. And then here's some more pictures from inside the unit and outside the unit. So just, this is a 3rd floor, that junction up here of the tightness for the roof, and then the tape along the windows. It's pretty incredible what we're doing for that air barrier. And so, but this, the zip sheathing for the outside before we're putting on the siding. So this building, officially, the siding, not official, the siding is like 95% complete at this time too. So we just did that, but getting that air barrier, all of this detailed work before we're putting the siding on, this building is so tight and so detailed orientated for this as well. And so they come in and expect it. So, we'll do the testing, but Efficiency Vermont will come to our site like every 2 weeks to do tests and look through when we're under construction as well. And yeah, so this is our solar array. So this is the rooftop. This is the solar, the design. It is so important to electrify our building, but it is so expensive. So we include the electric as people's rents. Because when we put this much solar in our building on the top, it only covers about 25% of the total electric cost. So, solar, and this is not including the heat pump hot water. So I'm actually not sure. So that's normal. Normally it's about 25%. So it's hard, like it is really expensive. These electric bills are high, but we're not putting that on our residents. And there's many parts to that, but it's this much solar. So when I go up to the roof and I'm looking around, you're not able to walk far. And so that is the one thing about, as Downstreet, we've been like, all right, solar farms, trying to investigate what is next, like community solar, things like that. There is a need to make this more affordable to operate, because that's what, for us as an organization, it's the cost to develop, right? This project, 26 units, cost $15.3 million to construct. That is a cost per unit of $588,000. That is so much money. And that's part of being a nonprofit developer. Like, we have to follow the Efficiency Vermont design standards. We're choosing to put solar on and pay for that. We're choosing to do the heat pump hot water. These items, but then getting the money for that almost is an easy thing, even though it took 2.5 years and multiple funding cycles, but then it's operating. So then think about the rental income that we're getting. We're not charging $2,400 for a 2-bedroom, right? Like the market that you could in Waterbury, we're instead charging $1,400. So then how do we operate this? And we don't operate for a profit, but be able to operate so that we have reserves for capital needs, right? So that we can replace the hot water tank when needed, so that when a heat pump fails, that we can replace that, so that if someone breaks an LED light, even though they're supposed to last 10 years, someone's gonna break it in 2 weeks, that we can replace that. It's really challenging as a nonprofit developer in that way to figure that out. And I will say the electric cost of the building, our first time we put heat pumps in were 2018. Actually seeing what the electric bill was, we didn't have solar in that building, but the next building, then having solar and seeing how little of an impact it was kind of heartbreaking. To really understand that impact. And so as an organization and just myself, it's like, all right, what's the next solution? How do we get there? But we're getting like solar credits and money to put solar onto buildings. So that's helping in that construction part, but the operating. But, who wants to be putting oil in buildings and things like that? Like, we need to be staying away. We have to think forward and not back, but thinking forward is thinking financially, how do we make this work as well? I think is really important. So last slide, I think, but just the broader community impact, of this project. Yeah, so this is, we're really supporting the downtown. We're providing workforce housing. One of the other service providers we're bringing in is hireability. So we've got a contract with hireability to be able to work with our residents to, provide resume building classes, but also connect them to local employers. We're just supporting the downtown and local businesses. Every community needs housing. Waterbury has spoken out that they need workforce housing. They need people working in the restaurants. Every community does. We are hopefully going to be able to place some families in these units that were displaced by the 2023 and 2024 floods. I mean, quite honestly, the 2 streets behind us are the houses that have flooded like 5 times through their first floor. And these poor residents just continue to rehab their own homes, but there are some people that have chosen not to. But we are this long-term resiliency. We're keeping these units perpetually affordable. So this is 26 units in Waterbury that will always be affordable housing and good quality affordable housing, and just that resiliency and sustainability. And yeah, that's the end of my presentation. And I made basically an hour. Yeah, thank you. Any questions?
Well, I have one for the windows.
Yeah.
Windows, what's the company you use?
Oh, I think these are Pella, I believe. Usually we're between like Pella and Marvin and our historic, but I believe these are Pella windows.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do they open?
Yes. So with our heat pumps, they don't open. They're the awning windows. So they're big. So honestly, small space that opens. I would prefer to be able to open more. I love some fresh air, but it's also a safety thing in our technically zoning. Second floor and above, and this is every community, should only open 4 inches for safety. And that's nothing either when you think about it. So awnings tend to actually be safer when you're thinking about housing for kids. Yeah. Yeah.
What's the maximum AMI units? Is it tiered? And then how are you choosing your residents? What's the priorities?
Yeah, so our maximum AMI in this building, we've got
Sorry, area median.
area median income. So area median income is 80%.
Okay. And how many is there lower requirement? Are all the units 80? Or?
No, we've got 30 to 80%. So we've got 5 units for those that are previously unhoused, so that'll be like 30%. We do have 6 project-based vouchers for this building if the state still has them. I don't know if we've heard about federal project-based vouchers being taken away. So we do have a contract for them, but it depends if they will be available in June when we'll start leasing up in June. But so most of them are about 60%. So 60%, for example, would be a 1-bedroom, or a 60% would be 2 individuals making about $55,000. So that could be a single mom and a child, or it's 2 people. And so it's weird, it's hard. Our compliance department is incredible, how they have to match that up with income into our units as well. But we're a mixture between 30, 60, and 80%.
And do you have a priority towards Waterbury, a priority towards, how are you running the lottery? Are you running a lottery? Like, what's that?
Yeah, so technically with fair housing law, it's very hard to have priorities. So that's it. When we have public hearings, everyone's like, people want to say prioritize people that currently live in Waterbury or currently work in Waterbury. We can't do that in that way. The way that we can market it easier to businesses, we can directly reach out to businesses and say, here's our process, applications are due at this point, you can market it that way. We figured out a way to kind of prioritize those that are being affected by the flood, like if they lost their housing, but it's hard to be like, oh, people currently working in Waterbury get first priority. But in a way of marketing, if we send it out, there's ways to almost prioritize. So, I mean, through this process, we also no longer as an organization hold wait lists, because people were on the wait list for like 10 years or would have a wait list for this community and then they moved out of state. And so the way like a wait list would happen is you'd reach out to these individuals on the wait list or they never respond. So now what we have is a vacancy notification list, so that when we have vacancy, you can sign up to notify when we've got vacancies in certain communities or certain buildings, and we'll send out a blast email saying, vacancy notification, we've got a vacancy here, applications open at this date and time, and submit an application, and then we'll review them in the order that they come in. But for instance, our project in Berlin that just opened in June, we sent an email out to the school. So we at the school letting them know, and gave an earlier notification list of sending that out. And it was the school, the businesses there, the hospital, stuff like that. Yeah.
Well, I applaud you for all this work. I mean, it's been real fun to drive through Waterbury and see what the heck is that?
Yeah.
Why Marsh?
So Marsh was, oh yeah, so why Marsh House? So I'm gonna get Marsh, I'm forgetting his first name, was the first settler in the town of Waterbury and settled to that site. So the park is named after the first manager or something like that, but Rusty something. Yes, and Rusty Parker I think Marsh was the first settler, and then Rusty Parker was something about leadership in Waterbury. And so it was, it is, I will say, I think the hardest part of a project is naming the project. I am just not creative in that way at all. And so I created a new system where when I have a project, I actually bring it to Downstreet staff in a staff meeting, and I'm like, give us 5 names, we vote on it, and then we'll take 3 to our board and have a vote, because I'm like, I can't be in charge anymore, because I've came up with Granite City Apartments. Like I'm not creative. And so, people actually as a staff will get really invested. They've like thought about history and things like that. And so we looked and then we did a deep dive history-wise. And the town of Waterbury are really connected to the history of Waterbury. So they felt pretty strongly about honoring, I think it's David Marsh, Frank Marsh, something like that, felt strongly, yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. Yeah.
Are the rents scaled by income? What are the general rents?
Yeah, so the rents are scaled by income. And so I will say this too, and I'm saying it publicly and everything, is like, honestly, affordable housing is still not affordable too. And then this is a issue statewide, townwide, countrywide. Affordable housing is not affordable. And I don't know what the solution is there because it's so expensive to construct. But I think it's also scaled on income. So like a 60% unit will cost less. Like a 60% one bedroom will cost less than an 80% one bedroom as well. So 80% you pay more, you have more income. So the idea then is, we're trying to get to that 30% of income, but I think like a one bedroom is like $1,400 to $1,500. And then a two bedroom, I think is about $1,600. Yeah.
So what happens when someone's income goes up?
It depends on the funding. So it depends on what funding sources we have in the project. So there's some that we have to, it only matters if your rent, usually it only really matters what your income is when you're first leased up, but then you still have to report your income each year. So when we use low-income housing tax credits, and for reporting, we have to report your income every year, and that's not an easy process to like get everyone in our portfolio's rents. Like you have to get proof, but it's okay if it's higher, then your rent won't change. That doesn't change. You're not then being like not eligible for that apartment. But then it's like we track being like technically you're overhoused or underhoused, because sometimes your income can go down too, right? But that doesn't mean you're going to pay less. But then we'll look at it and be like, oh, they're overhoused or underhoused. Are there other units that we can support in moving them to as well? And we don't force, but giving that option. So even if people are paying less rent than they should be, we give an option to move to a different unit. Yeah. Yeah.
Downstreet has people coming to you, different communities. How do you prioritize projects? And how do you decide what community, and now that your footprint's bigger, is that going to be harder because your staff's not really changing size-wise, is it? Or
No, and funding,
Yeah.
right?
So how do you prioritize?
It is so hard. It is, I honestly get at least 5 phone calls a week about a project. And it's different, right? It's like someone calling, being like, oh, I've got this land. Can you buy it and do something here? And so what we try to look at is what's the need? So right now, has anyone heard about the disaster relief funding that's in the state? The CDBG-DR it's called. And so this is in response to the 2023 floods. So those are the communities that Central Vermont, but also Lamoille County. So right now, like a funding source is creating my priority because it's what towns flooded and need housing. Barrie, Montpelier, Waterbury, Johnson, things like that. So where we'll fund, and then, so we look at it that way, but also when is the last time we brought new units to these communities as well? Because it's insane to me that we have to do a market study for every project. The fact that I pay $5,000 for a market study to say we need housing, I'm like, I don't need that, right? Like, we look on Zillow, there's 3 apartments for rent in this community. That should be the market study. So I will look to see, okay, what Montpelier, the last time I brought major units was 2019. We brought 30 units. Barrie, when's the last time we brought units? Well, really, this past year with 9 units, but how many people were displaced with the flood in Barry? Johnson, how many units were affected? So thinking that way, and then it's funders will kind of see where the state priorities are as well. But then it's also, oh, we just did a project in Berlin. We've never brought affordable housing to Berlin. There's employers right there that I'm sure could really, the school right there, the hospital, the hospital is constantly calling us being like, we need housing for our workers. And then, Northfield will come to the table being like, we've got a college here, we've got this and that. It is really hard. So I don't promise timelines. So if they've got a site, thinking of, how long can you hold on to this site? Like, is this something that you're saying you need to buy this in a month? Because even if I put 100% effort into it right now, it's gonna take, we don't buy property or the land until we're fully funded and designed at the end. So it's a year or 2 out, things like that. So there's a lot of things to the table. I'm like, oh, is there infrastructure? Because if there's no infrastructure, that's gonna cost an extra $400,000 or more. So it's difficult. There's a lot of different things that weigh at the table, but if something's really intriguing that has these items, it's how long can we hold? We need to do a feasibility study. What's that gonna take to make this feasible? And then it's really thinking of what can we absorb unit-wise in these communities? And is it on a bus route or things like that the funders think is a priority? It's so like I'm working on, it's normal to have like 3 to 5 projects. We right now are doing work on 13 different projects, but then there's like 5 to the side that could happen in the next 2 to 8 years.
That's more dependent on public funds then.
Yeah.
How many units are in a typical development?
Yeah, so there's a sweet spot. It's sweet spot funding wise. I'm just thinking, so for this project is 26. One that we are just finished in Berlin is 30. I would say for new construction, 26 to 30 is kind of a sweet spot that we figured out. Yeah.
So when you're doing things like feasibility studies or getting somebody to do design for whatever is being developed, do you have like a set database of designers and consultants who you work with, or do you change it up every time, or like what are some of the parameters behind like, who you work with?
Yeah, so we do RFPs for everything. So we do RFPs, but then I send it, and we have to publicly post that, so that's in the newspaper. And this is part of using federal funds and state funds, but then I'll also send it out to like a list of architects I've worked with before, and then the same as construction managers and engineers. And then, we'll have like a rubric for selecting, yeah. But I will also say, like, new construction managers and new architects will also schedule meetings with me throughout the year that want to get into like that lineup and just see how they can support in some smaller projects or things like that too. So it's always growing and changing. Yeah.
Do you have a preference for new development over renovation of existing properties?
Yeah, it's funny, we were talking about this at dinner. This is only my second new construction project, and I've been doing this for 10 years. Renovations usually mean they're historic rehabs, and some of the rehabs we've done are ones that are already in our portfolio that we were doing updates for, but then we just finished this building in Barry. It's called the Ward 5 School. But it was old schoolhouse. It's kind of fun. 3 of our employees at Downstreet went to school there. It closed in 1992, and then it became office space for Barry Housing Authority. But it'd been like at this point when construction started like vacant for 10, 11 years, but it was a 4-room schoolhouse. And so 4-room schoolhouse, like the basement was awesome. It had like the toilets that went down to here, like still like, you know, the sinks were here for water, for drinking fountains and things like that. But this building was built in like 1902 up, not right in downtown, up a hill in a neighborhood, but so abandoned, you know, like, and it was first, you know, Barrie Housing Authority reached out in 2021 when we had this crazy COVID relief funding, being like, we had 4 months to acquire funds and develop, and this building was going to be nuts. But it is this beautiful, beautiful project, and these units are incredible, high ceilings, huge windows, the wood, you know, the same wood from 1900, but dealing with historic preservation is so difficult. I'm like, how can I say this nicely? So difficult. So this is that we're talking about, this is an old building that is brick, right? And it was like when we're going through, so old building, huge windows, 12 feet windows. Can't replace the windows. So first thing, in historic, trying to replace windows, that's like the first thing. These windows are the windows. Oh, you can rehab those. So rehabbing the windows, thinking of that. So it's the glass, we're rehabbing, paying for that. But okay, these are high ceilings, huge windows, air conditioning, right? No, like we couldn't because they didn't want us to add chases. We had to keep the chalkboards. So we've kept, so the kitchens have chalkboards in them that are green, like the green, old, not even black chalkboards, green chalkboards. So keeping chalkboards, but then, we were able to get them taken out for the bathrooms, thank goodness, because I was like, that's where, you know, like, and I'm like, thank you. But then we got approval for the units to be able, and this is what's wild, to be able to divide some of them. So four units, 4 classrooms, we were able to, we preserved 2 of them to be a 2-bedroom. So it was that technically the classroom side. Then we could do two studios. The project was put on hold a little bit because of funding. We didn't get a funding cycle. So then when we re-engaged again with historic, they then decided, oh no, we're not going to allow that anymore. It has to go back to preserving it. And now we want to make sure that from entrance, you can see all 4 walls. So it's like we, have to have like a hallway to one side and see the back. And so it just, is so difficult. And then wainscoting, right? So it's like we're taking everything off. Insulation. This is an old building from 1900. Okay, so you're not letting us electrify, but how are we going to insulate this thing? And it's all plaster. It's a disaster. It's a brick building. We need to do so much. And they're like, they're like, no, we can't build out the They didn't want us to build out the walls at all. They wanted us to preserve how the windows looked. Everything. And so we had to prove that we could like take the wainscoting off and like insulate up and put the wainscoting back on. And of course, when we did that test on the one piece of wainscoting, we were able to take off without it breaking. But the rest of the building, absolutely not when we did. But then we had to replace it in kind. So it is such a process. Beautiful buildings, like beautiful units, would love to live in one. Like something that, I grew up in an old farmhouse, things like that, but the sticky tape. And then the funders are like, why did you keep the chalkboard? This is ridiculous. Why are you designing around the chalkboard? And I'm like, I can't. They're like, this layout would make so much more sense, historic. And then the funders will be like, this is ridiculous. You can't replace the windows. We're not gonna fund it. Or this is what we're gonna pick with historic preservation. I'm like, we can't not. So it's just negotiating and figuring it all out and bringing to the table. No project is easy, and then every project has their challenges. And so like new construction can be, I've learned once new construction like has started, the construction has started, it's, oh my God, it's so easy, like nothing comes up. And your contingency is usually pretty good, but like a rehab, your contingency is gone in the first 3 months. Yeah, but yeah.
It sounds like you don't cut any corners in terms of design and sustainability and all of that. But what kind of Sounds like too good to be true almost.
No, that is such a good question. Because, yeah, we, like, through our process with state funders and things like that, they're reviewing our, like, we are so in the nitty gritty, like, of schematic drawings for funding and then design development. We have to show our drawings at 60%, at 80%, at 100%, right? But then it's like getting that funding, and then, you know, once you're funded, you know, costs change, especially like the inflation in the last 5 years, just wild. The cost to construct is, the last time I calculated, is like projects are 39% more expensive than they were in 2019. Like but that was like a year ago. So now we've got tariffs. So I don't even want to know. But what first, so, you know, we're electrifying buildings. There's no backup heat. So so thinking about that, like funders at first will be like, what's your backup? Honestly, our buildings are so tight, I feel really good about. We're not in crazy rural areas. Well, Johnson's new to me, so I don't know what that's kind of like, but we're not putting backup, we're not putting generator. Like usually early on, it'll be like, okay, so if we're electrifying, are we putting a generator? Those things are massive at this size of project we're doing. So we might have a generator at first, but that's like the first to go when we're value engineering. And then, so like things like that, and then it's Efficiency Vermont wants us to have triple pane windows. That's usually like things like that will be early things to go. And it'll be like roof membrane. So I'm young, like, well, I'm 35, but I started doing this work at 25, and I was new. Like when I started at 25, I came from the services side, no background in this type of work whatsoever. So everything that I've learned on the job, learned by doing, learning from the architects, the engineers, everyone that we're working from. But think about it, we are putting our roof membrane, right? Like all we're doing is puncturing holes in it with all of our solar. So, you know, it's like sitting there and thinking, oh, when we have to replace this roof in 30 years, this is gonna be a pain in the neck. Like, or if there's a hole in this roof, something happens, this is wild, trying to fix something like this. So it's like the higher quality in that types of like the roof membrane, stuff like that. Like we're not able to be skimpy on insulation, stuff like that, because those regulations are so tight. But that's why the cost to construct is so high, $588,000 a unit. That is nuts. But we are developing high quality buildings. Like, and this is kind of the population that we're serving too. Like, I chose to put in our hallways like hospital grade carpet because you pour something on it and it's easy to clean, right? Like you can honestly pour like a glass of red wine on this carpet and you can just wipe it up. So, but thinking about the population that we're serving at time, like all spectrums, but there is also a really hard population that like over 25% of our units are people that were previously unhoused. So there's a lot of damage that happens too, and people are not easy on our units, so we are building with better quality items. Yeah. So, but yeah, definitely the things like, it's a really good question. And when it's new construction, it's a different story than rehab. So it's like I had a rehab in Waterbury, and like we had to totally nix upgrading the mechanical systems like out of oil. Like we had to end up keeping it as oil because we couldn't, and I couldn't even add the balanced ventilation to the building into a rehab of 14 units of senior housing because a project budget was so tight. So like it's different for new construction and rehab as to like what you can end up doing usually, or your value engineering. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
One of your slides, you talked about mixed income residents creating social cohesion.
Yeah.
You were just talking about the sort of difficulty of the real low income and / homeless. Do you have, is that statement backed up by experience that you've had, or, I mean, it's a nice idea. I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit more about what that vision means and how you see it work.
different populations living together.
Yeah.
Yeah, so for instance, my background, or before I did this work, was I worked for a statewide organization called Pathways Vermont. So they provide housing first. So there's this like housing first model services. The idea is, and when you think about housing, it's housing first and then everything else. So how do you expect someone to be sober if they don't have a safe place to go home every night, right? So it's like, or using their meds, or being safe, or finding, how do you have a stable job if you don't have a home to go to? Things like that. And so people, and something that Vermont did very well, but we did not have a plan, was in COVID. When COVID hit, we put every homeless person in a hotel room, which is, everyone deserved a safe place, right, to be. But then what's the solution? At that point, suddenly we're just gonna take everyone out of a hotel room and make them homeless again? But we didn't start thinking on that day, what's next? Like, how are we transitioning? And so with this, so we have a homelessness crisis in the state of Vermont. I think it's really obvious. We also have an opioid crisis as well. But I think what we're really lacking is services. And what is really the hard thing too about any housing, so we're developing housing, but there's no money for services. And and that's not just for us to be able to provide services. Like, we've got property managers, but they're not there 24 hours. But it's Washington County Mental Health, they probably have like 100 job openings right now. There's no money for it coming in, people working in this. So it's this population of we're taking someone that's homeless or from a hotel and putting them in a unit. How are we teaching them to live in that unit? What are we doing to help that all-encompassing, like, housing as part of healthcare? And this is this is me personally. I'm not speaking like of an idea, but when you really think of like housing and that whole idea of wellness, I understand why people would be not in a great place with mental health, substance use, not have a job if they don't have that housing. But then we put people in housing and leave them, and then it's like, how are we teaching them to be a good neighbor? When you've got it's a property manager that has 100 residents, they can't do that. That's not their job in that way. And it's just it's a fault of this system as a whole, in my eyes. I also grew up in the United Kingdom, so I have like this different perspective of ways too of different cultures managing things. But this system and funding for resident services, and we at Downstreet, we've gotten grants, so we've got some resident services, but it's not enough to provide adequate for our whole portfolio. But I think there needs to be more for some of the population that we're serving, and it's hard then. And so this is the other thing, is like senior housing. I think there's this, people are aging out of their housing, right, of their homes, and then, or their homes are too much to take care of. So this idea of creating senior housing, we technically, all of our units are mixed age, mixed income. We have so many seniors living in our housing, but they want to be in just senior housing. There is not a lot of money for senior housing, for affordable senior housing. So then they're put in with a family next door. And so how are we, creating that? These different types of housings and just being restrictive is really difficult. But then you don't want to just do 100% homeless housing, because just feeding like that type too. I don't have an answer, but I personally believe there needs to be, so then we're creating senior housing with some SASH, it's called supportive services at home. We've got some SASH services, but it's not enough for creating that community of just seniors either. We need more money, we need more housing. It's the fact of needing 40,000 new homes by 2030, mind-boggling. I don't know how we're gonna do it. We need more housing, we need it quickly. We need to make housing development quicker and cheaper, and we need the services to create different types of housing that address needs. But I do think there needs to be more, but there's money for services and housing for anyone to use. Yeah. Any other questions?
Are there any, sorry.
Yeah.
Are there any developers kind of like within your orbit that do a similar thing?
Yeah, so good question. Vermont is very unique that, so yeah, I focus in central Vermont and Lamoille County, right? Like that's Downstreet's area, but I always say each in Vermont, we are nonprofit developers split up regionally. So there's Champlain Housing Trust in Chittenden County and Franklin. We've got Wyndham Windsor. Then we've got Addison County Community Land Trust. So each area has their own nonprofit developer. So in a way, it's nice. We don't compete for the projects and funding in our own areas. We compete against each other statewide for funding, but it means we're kind of restrictive in a way of like how the capacity to develop in our area as well. But there's a total of 9 nonprofit organizations in this state, and we cover the whole state.
What for-profit developers do you compete against for public funds?
It's becoming more and more. So it's Summit and Chittenden County are really been the big one so far. They've not come to central Vermont yet because, and this is it, is that for-profit developers are coming to us and asking us to develop with them jointly because the market rents, like the cost to construct is so high, they need the nonprofit developer in order to get people to live in the building. Like the money that we can bring to the table of the state funds and that AMI of lower, they need that in order to be able to afford to construct. And the market rents would just be so high. Like it would be $3,600 for a 2-bedroom in Waterbury that people wouldn't then rent. So it's in private developers are not so interested in developing in central Vermont because they don't think they can get the rents for them based on because of the income, but the cost to construct, which is a good thing for us, but not a good thing. That's why we're not getting the housing. But then that's why like so much housing is going up in Chittenden County. You look at like South Burlington, I drive through South Burlington and there's another building, but those rents, man, they are not cheap. Like it blows my mind. And it's a real, Vermont's one of the highest in the country. Actually, I think it was the highest in the country I just read on like Forbes of like cost of income compared to cost of housing. The highest, yeah. Yeah.
So those developers, they don't have to have, allocate a certain number of units to be affordable in order to get the permits to build homes?
Technically statewide, like 15% of all new units are supposed to be allocated to those that were previously unhoused. Who's tracking that?
And do they actually charge them lower rents?
No one's tracking it for them. Yeah. You have a question?
Yeah, so given that there's a need that far exceeds the capacity to build right now,
Yeah.
and it's the nonprofit developers have chunked out the state, is like kind of just thinking about how you attack that. Is it that we need more nonprofit developers that are doing the same thing? Is it increasing the capacity of
It's more money.
And that was where I was gonna go. Like at what point are we capacity constrained or money constrained rather in terms of funding out there to even do these projects?
It's money. We have the capacity, we have the ability to do it, but it's money. So low-income housing tax credits, we're at small state minimum. So that's our major funding source. But we are also Vermont Housing Conservation Board, which is where we get most of our state funding. We're tapping that out every year from the State House. It's money to develop. And that's but it's also just hard, the cost to construct, how it's increased, right? So it's like the amount of money we're getting is not increasing, but the cost to construct is increasing. So we're building less with the same amount with the money too, but we need more. And so like at the State House, it's advocating at the State House for more money. Leahy was really strong for us in DC. We got, when ARPA funding, we got like 250 million in housing dollars that we spent through COVID so quickly on housing. Like we spent that, but we don't get those federal funds anymore. The disaster relief funding, so it's about 62 million that's coming into Central Vermont and to Lamoille County for response to the 2023 flood. And like 40 of that is for housing and like 20 of it is for infrastructure. And that's how the state chose to allocate that. So it's, they're trying to, any money we can get, we're trying to get and use that to housing, but it gets sucked up instantly. Like one project for the CDBG-DR funding, I'm applying for $7 million for one project, but I'm still using 4 other funding sources of state funds. It's not, like if I was to do, I don't want to take 15 million for one project and then not be able to fund other stuff as well. But projects are costing more and more, which is challenging. Yeah, the capacity is there, we're able to do it, but somehow getting the money. Yeah. And then it's hard because the private developers, you're trying to buy new. My God, it's so expensive. Or just buying a house. Yeah.
Does Downstreet do fundraising with like individual donors, or is it all?
Yeah. So Downstreet definitely does fundraising individual dollars. We don't for individual donors. We don't normally for projects like for this, but we have for some projects. So we have for our recovery residents for women and children. We had a gap, and we fundraised $400,000. We're actually building or redeveloping a nonprofit hotel, which really is a hotel for women and for families with children. To help hopefully transition. There's using like GA subsidies from the state to transition into permanent housing that we're fundraising for because we've got a construction gap. But we then fundraise ourselves for operations and different projects as well. But it's like when a project costs $15 million, it's not usually like someone's bringing $500,000 or $1 million to the table, but it's like, a $50 donation. It takes so much money for not enough work, so that individual fundraising's hard at that level. Yeah. Any other questions? Thank you so much.